We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by PrizePicks. We're talking key matchups to exploit in the divisional round. Of course, we're going to build a DraftKings lineup at the end, but only after we go game by game. Let's just dive right into it, and we'll start with the Saturday games. And I'm going to talk through these like game number 1, game number 2, game number 3, game number 4, because that's kind of how we're doing it from a DFS perspective when we go build a lineup at the end. A lot of times we'll be talking late swap and which games we should be trying to get access to in the beginning, and which games we'll be pivoting to later if things aren't going as planned. So Houston Texans at Baltimore Ravens is game number 1, 3:30 kickoff on Saturday. The Ravens are a 9.5-point home favorite in this one. The Texans are probably feeling pretty good about themselves, though, after what they did in Wild Card weekend. But what were your thoughts when you saw we were going to get Texans Ravens here?
Yeah, to be curious. I mean, the 3 of the 4 games this weekend are games that we did see in the regular season. A lot of them were from very early in the season. So it's gonna be interesting to see what could be taken away from those games by what each team does. We talked about a little bit last week. We thought it was going to be more advantageous the rematch for the Texans Browns for the Texans than it was the Browns, because it was, Joe Flacco was playing his team for the second time with the Browns, or while he was with the Browns. Stroud didn't play in that first matchup, and we've seen the Texans kind of take away some things that were unsuccessful. They learned from some of their mistakes. They actually had Derek Stingley covered Amari Cooper, but for the first time this year, did a little shadow job on Amari. I doubt they do something like that with the Ravens, but these teams played all the way back in the season opener. Like, it feels like another year ago, right? Technically was. It technically was another year. It was a year ago. But the Texans didn't score a touchdown in that game. Was it 25-9? It was CJ Stroud's first start ever. We've seen basically CJ Stroud answer like every call since then, from that game on. He's going to have to do it again this week. I mean, he's going to run into a similarly tough matchup. The Ravens don't play like as much man coverage as the Browns do, but they do play man coverage above the league base rate. They are another team that gets a lot of pressure on quarterbacks. If you go all the way back to the week 1 matchup too, I mean, they pressured Stroud on 48% of his dropbacks in that game. That was the second highest pressure rate that Stroud had in a game this season, and he only threw for 4.6 yards per pass attempt under pressure in that game. The Ravens are a team that just have not given up spike weeks to quarterbacks, and they faced a lot of good ones. Obviously, most recently, they just absolutely nuked Brock Purdy in that San Francisco offense, which we will talk about in the next game as well, and how good that they've been. And that was just such a great feather in the cap of Mike Macdonald, who's had a really good tenure as the defensive coordinator with the Ravens. So Stroud's going to have to answer this call again. Rookie quarterbacks historically have been terrible in Baltimore, 2-17 record since they've hired John Harbaugh. That includes Stroud in week 1, 0-2 in the playoffs. And then it also has been, Stroud is one of these guys that has had like really kind of cattywampus home road splits. At home, he's averaged 307 passing yards per game, 9.2 yards per pass attempt, 20 passing touchdowns in Houston this season. In 7 games on the road, only 231 passing yards per game, 7.3 yards per pass attempt, 6 passing touchdowns. He's faced 3 other top 10 defenses on the road this season. One was the Ravens. The other 2 are Jets and Panthers. And in those 3 games, he did not throw a touchdown pass at all. Only completed 59% of his passes, 5.2 yards per pass attempt. We believe Stroud is definitely, ascending to be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, and he's right on schedule. So this is going to be another test that he has to kind of knock down in this just great rookie season he's had.
Yeah, just looking at this game, Reeves, I think there's going to be some chalk here in game number 1. So Nico Collins is 7,100. I think he's going to be relatively owned. People wanted to I guess, glob on to what he's been doing over the last few weeks without Tank Dell. And then Devin Singletary is still 5,700. So just from a volume perspective alone, I think that people might go that direction. And then on the Baltimore side, it's really not a ton of ownership. Maybe Lamar Jackson ends up being like in the top 2, top 3 from a quarterback perspective, but everyone is going to the Ravens defense, it seems like, at 3,500, which I find kind of interesting because typically on these slates, I like to leave defense for towards the end and really just kind of late swap into the lower owned one if I need to. Or
just not play the most popular one.
Or just not play the most popular one in game number 1. That seems like a massive trap to me. That's kind of my initial thoughts on, at least from an ownership perspective. But on, I guess, the skill position players here, does anything kind of stand out for Nico Collins since we talked about him? And is that something at 7,100 that you're kind of confident in? This is just such a tough matchup.
Yeah, the Ravens have been very stingy on opposing wide receiver ones. I mean, the reason you like Nico is literally just the volume, right? I mean, we know
Mhm.
Noah Brown's not going to play in this game. The Texans are really down to just Nico Collins. He now has run 201 pass routes this season with Stroud on the field and Tank Dell off the field. And on those routes, he's 3.8 yards per route run. He has 35% of the team targets, 47% of the team air yards, been targeted on 30% of his routes. So he is going to have that opportunity. And you look at the past 5 games he's played with Stroud in full, 7 for 104 and a touchdown, 9 for 191 and a touchdown, 7 for 80, 9 for 195 and a touchdown, 6 for 96 and a touchdown. Like some crooked numbers involved in some of those lines. He's a guy that's had like these really big spike weeks for us this season. So I think the larger you go up in field size this weekend is when you want to start moving away from some of the more popular pieces. So if he is going to be really popular in that first game, then he probably is a guy I'll be more hesitant in larger field. But I mean, the opportunity, like you said, has just been locked in for this guy, and they just kind of don't really have anyone else but to push the football to him too.
Yeah, that's true. Quickly before we move on to the Ravens, in terms of the way too early divisional prop drop that went out last night. So if you guys want that, definitely check out the link in the description. We went 5-0 on this drop last week, which was cool. Turned $100 into $1,000 for people that were tailing that one. The Njoku, Mahomes to Rashee Rice, Mason Rudolph to throw a pick. That was actually a pretty fun sweat on Monday. And then Jared Goff over 260. So all of those hit. Feel pretty good about that. Obviously, if you're in the NBA streets as NFL is winding down, on a pretty insane run over there as well. 27-5 in NBA over the last few days, which is pretty crazy. So check that out. There's a completely different prop drop newsletter for baseball and hockey and of course basketball. So the way too early stuff this week, I did have a couple plays from this game that I'm going to need to talk through with you, Reeves. I took an over on Lamar Jackson passing yards, 227.5. I also took an over on Flowers, 51.5. And a lot of that had to do with what I read in the worksheet, Reeves, about how Flowers actually gets more downfield targets when Mark Andrews is in. And Andrews has been a full participant so far in practice this week. So let's talk through Lamar, and I'm curious what you think about Zay Flowers as well.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with Lamar Jackson, right? Like you look at this Ravens season and it ties into what we've seen for his career. I mean, since the Ravens drafted Lamar Jackson, they're 59-22 in his starts, 8-13 in games he hasn't started. The past 3 years are 3-7 in games Lamar Jackson hasn't started. And having him healthy for the first time since 2020, obviously you see they go 13-4, have the best record in the AFC. And this is a team that's like tested. They have 10 wins this season against teams that had a winning record this season. They won 6 games against playoff teams. We talked about them, beating the 49ers. Like they've punched up literally all season. You look at Lamar Jackson, set career highs in completion rate, yards per completion. Todd Monken made a difference. Their overall pass volume isn't as didn't make like a seismic jump because they've just been in the lead.
Mhm.
Like they've just led like this season, like the entire time. Like they've literally led for the most snaps in the NFL. But their early down pass rate and their pass rate expectation is over par. So like Todd Monken has made a difference, and there is upside for Lamar Jackson from a passing stance. He's been excellent at home this year. 9.3 yards per pass attempt at home, 14 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, significantly worse on the road. He's been really good. He leads the NFL in yards per pass attempt under pressure. And that's great here because the Texans, when they don't get pressure, are one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. When they haven't gotten pressure on the opposing quarterback, they've allowed a 74% completion rate. That's 27th in the NFL, 7.9 yards per pass attempt when they haven't pressured the opposing quarterback. That's 25th in the NFL. And like I said, even if they get home,
Yeah,
Lamar leads the
doesn't
NFL
matter.
in yards per pass attempt against pressure. The other thing too is you want to watch out for is the use of play action in this game. The Ravens and Lamar Jackson, obviously Lamar has been one of the best play action quarterbacks, since he's come in the NFL, given that what he allows offenses to do. But this season, 10 yards per pass attempt using play action, fourth in the NFL. He's completed 73% of his passes using play action, sixth in the NFL. Against play action this season, Houston Texans, 31st in the NFL and allowing 10.1 yards per pass attempt, 72% completion rate on those play action passes. That's 30th in the NFL. And then also, if you're looking under the hood even further, the Texans also 28th in the league in rushing points allowed to quarterbacks this season.
Hmm.
Probably not a great spot here when you're facing the best rushing quarterback in the NFL.
Probably not. That actually leads me, and I took one more prop from this game. I took Lamar Jackson to score a rushing or receiving TD. Houston, obviously, they gave up a lot of yards on the ground, like you just said, but league leading 7 rushing touchdowns allowed to the position as well. And Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, from a per game standpoint, 91.8 rushing yards per game for Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, which is completely insane, obviously, and an amazing matchup there. So I'm like all in on Lamar at this point. Do you think that this Andrews stuff has any impact on Zay Flowers, or what are your thoughts on him in general? Because it seems like he's the weapon that people are probably still going to gravitate towards here.
Yeah, and we'll see if Andrews playing means that Andrews is 100%. If we're
Right.
going to see a flaw, we like that's stuff we don't know, right? And look at like Sam Laporta. I mean, last week, like he still played his regular regimen of snaps.
That was wild.
He didn't look great on him.
Mm-hmm.
He did get the touchdown, but he definitely looked bulky with that knee brace on. So we'll see if there's any restrictions on Mark Andrews. Obviously, the Ravens have a viable player like Isaiah Likely that's shown capable in the offense, whereas like the Lions were turning to like Brock Wright.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see if that is any reduction with Mark Andrews. But while he's been on the field this season, Zay Flowers has been impacted by Mark Andrews. He's been targeted 19.1% of his routes. And these are almost identical samples. Zay Flowers this season has run 262 pass routes with Mark Andrews on the field, 259 pass routes with Mark Andrews off the field. So like dead split. He's been targeted 19.1% of his routes with Andrews on the field, 22.4% with Andrews off the field. Not like a major difference, but where we see kind of the difference with Zay Flowers with Andrews on and off the field is his scoring opportunities and the types of targets he's getting. He has just 1 touchdown this season with Andrews on the field and does not have a single target in the end zone with
Wow.
Mark Andrews on the field this season. 4 touchdowns, 4 end zone targets with Mark Andrews off the field. The other thing, like you kind of hinted at, is his ADOT actually goes up with Andrews on the field. He's not forced to kind of circumvent like the loss of Andrews in like the intermediate area of the field and the shallow area of the field. He actually averages 10.8 air yards per target with Andrews on the field, as opposed to 6.6 air yards per target with Andrews off the field. And we actually have a direct matchup when these teams played in week 1 without Mark Andrews on the field that tie right into those splits. Andrews didn't play in the season opener between these teams. Zay Flowers ended up with 10 targets. Again, the target share goes up, but he only averaged 2.8 air yards per target in that game. So he's going to be probably at some more downfield targets. We've seen that Houston this year, they've allowed 13.8 yards per catch to wide receivers. That's 28th in the NFL. They've allowed 40 catches of 20 or more yards. That's 20th in the NFL to wide receivers. So if he gets some more downfield targets, it gives him a chance to hit one of these bigger plays instead of having to stack targets and stack volume on, these lower ADOT type of plays.
Okay, well let's move on to the next game. We'll circle back to this, I'm sure, if there's some other players to talk through when we build a team at the end. But I'm excited to talk about this next one. We have Packers at 49ers, and the 49ers are 9.5-point home favorites against this Packers team, and specifically Jordan Love, that's looked just incredible since about halfway through the season. I know there's been a little bit of a scheme change there that has really made a difference, but he's just been flat out good. So it's a little bit of an interesting situation with Green Bay, just because there's so many different weapons to go to. We saw Jaden Reed not catch a pass last week, which was brutal. So apologize to anyone that tailed me on the Jaden Reed over last week. But in general, we have a rested 49ers team against this Packers team that is extremely hot. So what were your thoughts on this one? I mean, no Aaron Rodgers, but I mean, the 49ers versus the Packers, like this is just prime time.
Yeah, it's the only game we haven't seen this season of the 4. Like these two, the non-rematch of the regular season. And like you said, it's a two-storied franchise that had a great playoff history. Obviously you have the narratives of, Matt LaFleur and, Kyle Shanahan. They worked together with the Texans, the Falcons, the then Washington, the Redskins, not the Commanders or football team. So these guys have been around. They faced each other 2 times in the playoffs. Kyle Shanahan's won both of those matchups. So you've got kind of a little bit of the narrative street too. And honestly, this whole playoffs have a lot of the Shanahan coaching tree imprint is all over these playoffs. And we got to give the Packers a lot of credit. They were the one team that I thought were really probably the team I was the least confident in probably winning last week outside the Steelers. They became the first number 7 seed in this short sample that the NFL added this to win in the postseason. They did it in like dominant fashion too. Like they didn't just like beat the Cowboys. I mean, they went in and just dismantled them. Like
Yeah.
absolutely. It was at one point it was I think 48-16 with 10 minutes left in the game, like an absolute thumping. It was obviously 27-0 at one point in the first half.
Yeah.
And they deserve a lot of credit. What's going to be interesting here is starting with the defensive side and like what Joe Barry did in that game. So the Packers were a team that typically rely on pressure. They rely on blitzing a good amount. They just scrapped all that. They just dropped back and played coverage in that game. They actually had the lowest pressure rate of any team in the wild card round. They blitzed at a way lower rate than they did during the regular season. And what that did is it forced the Cowboys to make some really bad checks early in that game. Like on second down play calls for the Cowboys, they ran on second down every play in the first half except for one. And like this forced them into a lot of third and longs and stuff like that. Now, are you going to be able to do that against this San Francisco team, right? Like, are you going to get Brock Purdy to check into runs at Christian McCaffrey versus Tony Pollard? Because if you look at the Packers the past 4 weeks, they've been good against the run, really good against the run. But then you look at like their opponents, Carolina, Minnesota, Chicago's good run game, and then Dallas, who really hadn't run the ball well all season efficiently. So, like, are you going to get the 49ers to check the Christian McCaffrey runs? Is that the game plan? Probably not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at what do you do then? You're kind of damned if you damned if you don't. If you blitz Brock Purdy, he's been the best quarterback against the blitz this season. So like it's real just a quandary. And this is the thing with the 49ers, right? Like they obviously led the NFL in yards per play. And when they had all five of their beasts on the field, McCaffrey, Debo, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and Purdy all on the field the same, they averaged 7.3 yards per play on offense this year. Like absolutely just like an absurd number. So they've been kind of like a Death Star with all these guys healthy on the field. The only team to really give them trouble is the Ravens. They're like at full capacity. Even when they had that 3-game losing streak in the middle of the year, they were kind of down Debo, down Trent Williams.
Yep.
Now they're coming into this game fully healthy. And, Purdy's one of these guys, like you at least have a fighting chance if you get pressure on him. But if you don't get pressure on him, like we've talked about some of these numbers on the show during the course of the season, but when from a clean pocket this season, Brock Purdy has completed 77% of his passes, 10.4 yards per pass attempt. Like absolutely just an absurd number. He still is like top 10 when you in like pressure rate stuff, but at least he's only completed 56% of his passes, 8.2 yards per pass attempt, which is crazy against pressure. But still, it's like at least you have a fighting chance if you can pressure him. And Green Bay, literally, when they don't pressure the opposing quarterback, has been one of the worst teams, kind of, in the NFL, when they haven't gotten pressure. So they also are another base cover 3 team. Like when they do play a lot of zone coverage and, no passer has completed a higher rate of his passes for more yards per pass this season than Purdy. So it's kind of an interesting quandary that Joe Barry's in. Like, what do you pick, like, with the 49ers? Like, how do you slow down this team, right? Like, he's going to have to pull some stuff from what the Ravens did in that matchup. But the problem with the 49ers is always from a DFS perspective is, one, we can play Christian McCaffrey, but he's always expensive. You can try to pair him with Brock Purdy and say, all right, well, I'm going to just monopolize all of the 49er touchdowns. If I just put Purdy and McCaffrey in the same lineup, we've done that a few times successfully this year. But now Purdy is expensive. It's really hard on this particular slate to get both of those guys in the same lineup. Yep. And then it's also from a stacking stance, from a wide receiver stance, or adding George Kittle, like getting one of these guys right on a weekly basis, because none of them get high value. Like the 49ers are a team like where no one gets double-digit targets like on a game basis ever, because they're so efficient. So who do you pair Purdy with? Everyone's expensive. We know they're not going to get targets. You basically have to get that pure run out on any 49er pass catcher you pick, whether it be Debo, whether it be Ayuk, whether it be Kittle. You have to optimize those 6 to 8 targets, like where you get the guy that has the 2 touchdowns or has the 100 yards. And it makes it so hard to kind of pair him from a DFS stance, all season long. It's one of the problems we've had.
Props too, Reeves. Like I was staring at this yesterday as I was doing the way too early, and I'm writing down names and all this stuff, and I ended up with just like all of them, right? So like, what do I do here? I don't really want to take all of them in terms of like the prop market. You can't. So I ended up not taking anything from the 49ers side, at least early in the week. I'm going to see if there's anything else that pops up later on. I took actually that's not true. I did take a touchdown prop for Debo, but that's the only thing I've taken so far, was just some touchdown stuff that I felt confident about. From a DFS perspective, though, it does look like Christian McCaffrey is going to be the highest owned player on the slate. He's just 8,800. We see this in the playoffs sometimes. DraftKings will loosen up pricing a little bit to try and get in some of these studs. And that's going to lead a lot of people to being able to pay up for George Kittle as well at 5,200. So I think those guys are going to be the most popular. But if we're just looking at like the quarterback position on this slate, even though it's game number 2, Brock Purdy is going to be the highest owned quarterback at 6,500, I think by a pretty large margin. Lamar Jackson probably number 2. So definitely some interesting dynamics on the San Francisco side. I don't really know which one my preference is based on the passing weapons yet. So I'm with you. I'm going to kind of see if some of these things pop up from a prop perspective later on in the week. But anything on the Green Bay side that stands out to you, that's like another thing. I don't know what to do with these Green Bay pass catchers anymore now that some guys are coming back. We had some guys not playing the full complement of snaps that have been hurt, and we got 2 tight ends flying around. Like, I think that's just a 0 for me, and it seems like no one's really that confident in DFS right now either.
No, I mean the Packers, and they have a nice flush. They're flush with riches, like a young pass catchers. It's been a great run out for them this season, and they've gone through a number of injuries, and all these young guys have stepped up. Whether it be Jaden Reed, whether it be Dontavian Wicks, whether it be Bo Melton for when they've needed him, whether it was Tucker Kraft, all these guys have contributed, and they look like they're in a great spot. But for us, it's problematic. Jordan Love in the wild card round had 21 dropbacks. On those plays, Romeo Doubs, 16 pass routes, Dontavian Wicks, 13, Jaden Reed, 11, Christian Watson, 8, Bo Melton, 7. Everyone was on the field for at least 33% of Jordan Love's dropbacks. No one was over 76%. That's it's a sum of parts game. And you look at the tight end position, Tucker Kraft, 14 pass routes, 8 for Luke Musgrave. It was the lowest route participation that Kraft has had since week 11 when Musgrave first suffered that kidney injury. So they're literally just rotating everybody in. Like, everyone's getting a piece. We do have a pretty good signal that Dobbs is going to be on the field the most of all these guys, but also there's been like a whack-a-mole game. Like, you look at Dobbs, he had 151 yards. He was the guy last week.
Right.
But that was also the first time he caught more than 4 passes a game since week 11.
None of these guys have a prop over 40 yards, Reeves. It's so funny. It's like all these guys have anything from like 28 to 40 yards, and like they have no idea either. So gross.
Yeah, it is. I would say if you're looking from like a matchup signal stance, like the 49ers, they have allowed 9.1 receptions per game to outside wide receivers. That's 31st in the NFL. That would give kind of Dobbs and Wicks the more of a signal. I think Wicks is probably my favorite of all the guys, just because he's been their best wide receiver, like from a per target basis all season. But again, like, that's only for like if you're talking about like DFS, like trying to scout like ownership. I think like the larger field size you get, like, you're gonna have to just take a shot on one of these guys. Hopefully you get the right guy and gets a touchdown, or you avoid it altogether. But on Saturday only, you're not gonna be able to.
Right.
Because the thing is, there should be a lot of dropbacks in this game. We've got a huge road favorite. Jordan Love's been playing well. We kind of want to have someone to play on our bring back side of the 49ers, right?
Right.
And it's hard to go to Aaron Jones. And I know a lot of people are going to want to. He's been so good, right? He's got 4 straight 100-yard games. We did see last week he had the 3 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, when the regression hits, right? Didn't he have 2 the whole year or something crazy like that?
He had 2 rushing touchdowns the entire season coming into last week, 3 in the game. A lot of second half stuff was big in that game. He had 2 touchdowns in the first half, but it only was averaging 2 yards per carry, and then it was just jailbreak in the second half of that game. But even with the game script, I mean, this 49ers run D is really good. They face a league low 15.6 rushes per game from running backs, because obviously they lead a lot of games. They did give up some chunk gains this season. If you do want to say hey, Aaron Jones has looked healthy. He's now had more explosive runs the past 4 weeks than he had the entire season, coming in. But game script, it's really hard. He's not getting a lot of catches in the receiving game. So it's really kind of hard to kind of glom onto him. That's why McCaffrey, I think, stands out from an ownership perspective, is that he is just so head and shoulders above the rest of the field at running back, that a 30-point McCaffrey game could just drag everybody else on the slate.
It's not like he's 10K, 8,800. You can absolutely afford him on this slate, right? Especially with the other running backs. Like, basically the salary drops off from 88 to like this mid 6K range for like Aaron Jones and some of the Detroit guys. So yeah, I mean, you can absolutely get him in. It's not difficult at all.
In large field, we're going to need him to fail.
Yeah,
for sure. Or just not fail, like a fail Christian
like 25.
Like, yeah. Can he just have like 19?
Yeah.
Like,
oh God. Now we're cooking. Yeah.
Like, that's what you're looking for, right? I think we were in the same spot a few weeks ago when they played the last game he played it with the Commanders, when he was going to be like the mega chalk, right?
Yep.
It was like him and Kyron, and we were just like,
sorry for the overs after he got hurt. That was painful. Yeah.
It's like you just need him to have like 20.
Yep.
Like just don't shadow realm us. And that in larger field, that's what the story is again this week. You just need McCaffrey not to shadow realm us. But
Yep.
I mean, these Packers pass catchers, like I wish I like I said, outside wide receivers have been kind of the larger signal, but it's not like the 49ers on a per target basis are bad against those guys. They just face a lot of pass attempts. I mean, on a per target basis, they're sixth in yards per target, a lot of the outside wide receivers. They're eighth in touchdown rate. It's
Hmm.
not like they're absolutely getting flooded. They just face a lot of passing volume. And we should have that again in this game if you're following the game script and stuff. Jordan Love becomes interesting, I think, particularly on the two gamer, right? The
Okay.
two game slate, I think he becomes pretty interesting. He's just been so damn good. I mean, since week 11, the only quarterback with a better rating than Jordan Love is Brock Purdy, the guy he's playing. I mean, he's got
Yeah.
21 touchdowns, one interception over that span. We have talked about on previous shows how the Packers were able to calibrate this offense. First half of the year, he was just a guy that relied on inefficient, deep targets. They got the quick passing game now. And now you see when he built up that confidence, you're able to play out of structure and add those things to your game when you're on schedule. And that's what we've seen with Jordan Love the back half of the season. And Packers fans should be just feel really good about what they have now with this team moving forward, even if it does end, on Saturday night. But out of all the teams the 49ers could have played, I think the Packers probably might be the scariest one this week because obviously they couldn't have faced the Cowboys due to seeding, and obviously like them not having to face the Rams is a big deal. But like the Packers are one of the hottest teams in the NFL, and this if you look at the history of the divisional round. Favorites have been really good. They have a 56-28 record since the NFL expanded, but those teams are just 37 and 47 against the spread. And we've got three really big spreads
Yeah.
this weekend. So like I could see the Packers whether it being backdoor or them just keeping this game tighter than it should be. I mean, 9.5 in this round of the playoffs is a lot to just give down.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'll take the 49ers as well. I know it's 9.5, and that could be a little bit of a fish play. I think that just in general, this game, if we get efficiency and we get some volume here, like it's not surprising that this is the highest total at 50.5. There could be some absolute fireworks here.
I think this game's light too. I think this
Yeah.
is if you don't want to lay the 9.5 or you don't feel confident in the Packers. Obviously,
I like
Saturday
this total,
sets up
yeah.
for a pretty good Wong. If you do the old school 6-point teaser, like you
Yep.
have Ravens, Niners, you can easily just tease
Ooh,
both those
now we're
down
talking.
if you want. But also, I do think that this game has a good shot to go over as long as there's no rain or anything goofy coming in later in the week.
Okay. Before we move on to Sunday, was there anything you liked in the betting markets for Texans Ravens? I kind of skipped over that. 43.5 point total, 9.5 point spread in favor of the Ravens.
Yeah, again, another huge spread, which I think is tough to lay. I mean, if you
Mhm.
just want to take the blind points, I do think, like I said, the Saturday sets up for a good to just tease both the Ravens and 49ers down
I like it.
if you want to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of, I don't know if you saw this clip. Amon Ra, St. Brown must have a podcast or something. They were talking about like what team is like super dangerous, and every single one of them said the Packers. Like I know they play them twice a year and they know them a little bit better, but those guys are like really bullish on this Packers team. They've obviously seen how good they are recently in real time. So I always think that's interesting when like players from even the same division are giving a lot of positive reviews for a team that's getting hot, right? So I'm not. I guess I still think the 49ers will win this game, but I wouldn't rule out the Packers of like putting up a really big fight here. So let's move on to the Sunday slate. There's some fun games here as well, starting with Tampa Bay and Detroit. Detroit is a 6.5 point home favorite in this one. Another home game for the Lions, which is pretty cool. It was nice to I'm not even just like a big Jared Goff guy in general, but it's pretty cool to see him kind of exercise that Stafford demon a little bit. I know Stafford got his Super Bowl when he left, but nice to see the city of Detroit really embrace Goff just after a huge playoff win. So what are your thoughts on Tampa and Detroit?
Yeah, this game looks like a lot of fun on paper. Obviously, these teams played earlier in the year. There's some stuff that happened in that game on the Buck side that we'll touch on that I think is going to kind of revert itself here. But definitely the Lions are just one of these teams that have just been so tried and true, consistent at home. And everyone always brings up like the Jared Goff like home road splits, and I definitely think there's some merit to like Jared Goff playing in bad weather.
Sure.
When you talk about like his hand size and stuff like that. But literally, Jared Goff for the history of his career, his success has been predicated on one thing.
Pressure.
And it's pressure.
Yeah.
Like, can you disrupt him?
Yeah.
If you can disrupt Jared Goff, you have a shot. And if you can't disrupt Jared Goff, he plays up to like that first round pedigree, the number 1 overall draft pick that he was. And we saw that again last week when the Rams didn't pressure Jared Goff, which was very frequently in the first half of that game. He completed every pass. He was 19 of 19 when they didn't pressure him. I mean, there was just times in that game he was standing back there. The Laporta touchdown, like you can't ask, Alex Hoyt to guard Sam Laporta even with one knee for 4 seconds. Like that's not going to happen. And we saw when the Rams on the few plays they were able to actually get to Goff and disrupt him, we saw the issues with Jared Goff again. He was 3 of 8. 4.4 yards per pass attempt when the Rams got pressure on him. The problem was they didn't get very much pressure on him, which was what we talked about going into that game too. The Rams were kind of more of a passive team. And that's when you look at Goff's top down stats when kept clean this season. Second in the NFL behind Brock Purdy in passer rating, 75.9% completion rate, 8.3 yards per pass attempt, 25 touchdowns, 3 interceptions when kept clean. Under pressure, 62 rating, drops in half, 50.7% completion rate, 6.3 yards per pass attempt, 6 passing touchdowns, 9 interceptions. You have to disrupt Jared Goff. It's the thing that's followed him his entire career. It's why Sean McVay went and got Matthew Stafford. He wanted a quarterback that could win outside of the play succeeding. Right. Like that's the whole reason. And now it's funny we're having the same conversations almost now with Tua. Like we're at the Jared Goff point with Tua. Like with that, like has Mike McDaniel taken Tua as far as he can? But I digress. We'll let that for the
tons of time in the offseason to talk through that one, Reeves.
But what we know, so facing the Buccaneers, we know at least they're going to try to disrupt Goff, right? Like this is a heavy blitzing team. They play a lot of man coverage, but these teams, again, this is a rematch. They played in week 6. The Buccaneers only pressured Goff on 27% of his dropbacks. Jared Goff had just one game with a lower pressure rate this season. And the thing is, the Bucs tried. The Todd Bowles did his Todd Bowles thing. They blitzed Goff on 38% of his dropbacks. It was the 4th highest rate a team has blitzed, that has blitzed Goff. He was pressured, though, on just 27.8% of those blitzes. That's a huge problem. To give you some added context, the Bucs on Monday night, their blitzes, they had a pressure rate of 55% on Jalen Hurts. So like it's huge that it's imperative that they are able to generate pressure here when they do blitz, because when they did blitz Goff and did not create pressure, he was 8 of 13, 120 yards, 9.2 yards per pass attempt with a touchdown. When they failed to pressure Goff in totality in that week 6 game, 27 of 35, 309 passing yards, 8.8 yards per pass attempt, 2 of his touchdowns. They only pressured Goff on 13 dropbacks, and guess what? 4.9 yards per pass attempt. He was 3 of 9 passing. It all just, again, predicates on can you disrupt Jared Goff? And then that's where you'll see the success of the Lions in general. But I do think it does falls on Jared Goff, though, because I do think this Tampa Bay run defense is pretty solid and is good enough to put up a fight. So the Lions are going to have to throw in this game. I mean, Tampa Bay's played the run well in totality, 3.9 yards per carry to running backs as 9th in the NFL. They've only allowed 5 rushing touchdowns to running backs. That's the tied for the fewest in the league. And when you look at this Lions team, I mean, since they've had David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, they've just been crushing it on the ground. I mean, they have a 17 rushing touchdowns since week 10 when both those guys are in the backfield. The next closest team is 10. We saw it again. They each get a touchdown again. The problem is for DFS, if we could play just Detroit running back, he'd be incredible.
Of course.
He did rival Christian McCaffrey. Like if you told me I could just play Detroit running back, I might pay more than I pay for Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
It's actually how good you think from like what think about when we just had David Montgomery as the RB1 and when we just had Jahmyr Gibbs as the RB1.
Great.
Like those guys were as good. But the problem is they cannibalize each other from a touch perspective. And they are getting there each through touchdowns. But if you look at their volume, it's like a dead 50-50 split, which makes it tough to live in DFS that way.
It does. Yeah, these guys are difficult. I think from a DFS perspective, like most people are just going to gravitate towards these cheaper wide receivers for Detroit. Both Josh Reynolds and Jameson Williams look to be absolutely piled on at like 37 and 3,600 respectively. So what are your thoughts on those two guys? Good chalk, bad chalk? Like these are the type of guys that I typically try not to play on these 4-game slates, is just these cheaper wide receivers. But it does seem like to be a spot where they're going to be passing a lot. So curious your thoughts on those guys.
Yeah, and we'll see if we don't get Khalif Raymond again for another week, because his absence did lead to both Josh Reynolds and Jameson Williams setting season highs in route participation, snaps on the field. Josh Reynolds was the guy that got off last week. He had 80 yards, matched a season high all the way back in week 1. I do think Jameson Williams is interesting from like this matchup perspective because the Buccaneers are 31st in catches of 20 or more yards
Mm.
allowed to wide receivers. What's funny, and we're going to get to it, is the team that is dead last is the Lions, which
And no
makes
one
this
wants to play Mike Evans. That's a leverage play. I don't want to
man.
skip ahead, but I will have Mike
This
Evans
might be our last
everywhere.
chance to play Mike Evans, and
Everywhere.
I've been on, and you know, all season I've been all about playing Mike
Yeah,
Evans.
that's true.
But on throws 20 yards or further downfield, the Buccaneers are 28th in completion rate on those throws to wide receivers. We did see in week 6 Jameson Williams cash when he's in. I do think it leads them, but anytime like the cheap wide receiver also comes with high ownership, it's hard to latch onto, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is because even if you hit, like, what'd you win? Like,
Right.
you're like not even happy or like won or like got off because the field's on him. So Reynolds and Williams. I mean, obviously Amon-Ra just put it in, dude.
Yeah.
Dude's gonna catch 8 passes for 100 yards. It's like
Every game. Yeah.
just put it in. So you just keep playing Amon-Ra. We did see Laporta. Nothing changed for Laporta. He ran a pass route at 80% of the dropbacks. His season long rate is 79%, so nothing changed. He didn't look great. He looked slow to me, and that's subjective, but playing with that knee brace, he did get the touchdown. He was only targeted on 12% of his routes. It was the second lowest rate in a game this season. We have been able to get guys against the Bucks, though, from a tight end perspective. So if he is just feeling healthier and he's able to do more, you know, we do have kind of that layout here where we've seen guys like Kyle Pitts, Tucker Kraft, Evan Ingram, Juwan Johnson, Dallas Goedert all touch up the Buccaneers over the back quarter of the season. So if you want to take a leap of faith, maybe in a 4-game slate on Laporta being more healthier, there is an opportunity there.
Okay. Talk to me about Mike Evans and Palmer. So same thing last week. I took Puka and Robinson, outside wide receivers. Like, it's a pretty simple matchup play here, but curious your thoughts on going back to the well with Evans after he dropped an absolute bomb last week. So I always feel like it's a good opportunity to get back on the train when he does that.
Yeah, and it's not just him leaving some points in the field. We have seen kind of a little bit of a change in the guard since Chris Godwin's wife
True.
attacked Dave Canales on Instagram. The Mike Evans has 4 fewer receptions now in 5 of his past 6 games. And he only did that in 4 of his first 12 games this season. He's been out targeted by Chris Godwin 50-40 over that span. And Evans is still like fine. Like the target tree still is overall thin. He still has 21% of team targets. He still has 33% of team air yards over that span. It's just not as gaudy as a run as we had earlier in the year. I do like going back to him though in this particular spot. Man, if you remember when these teams played earlier in the year, it was only 1 or 2 games. The Buccaneers didn't score a touchdown. Evans was completely just naked for a 92-yard touchdown. And
that's right. He did this again. He dropped a bomb early in the year.
It was tipped. The pass was tipped at the line of scrimmage. It was Baker's only interception of the game. He finds
That's right.
play.
Okay.
It was like a blown coverage. It was going to be a 92-yard touchdown. Like Evans was all alone. Well, he might have dropped it. We don't know. That's what we can't say. But man, he would have just coasted into the end zone. But this Lions team, we just want to keep attacking them, right? Like because I think that although Godwin has gotten more targets than him recently, this matchup still kind of favors where Evans wins. He leads the team. He's got 21 catches of 20 or more yards this season. We just talked about it. The Lions are 32nd in the NFL. They've allowed 56 receptions of 20 or more yards to opposing wide receivers. They've allowed 10 touchdowns on those receptions at 29th in the league. Over the past month, the Lions have allowed receiving touchdowns of 38, 50, 42, 38, 92, 26 yards to wide receivers. Also another pair of touchdowns inside the 10-yard line. And then, since these teams have played, the Lions 27th in receptions allowed per game to wide receivers. They're allowing a league high 202 receiving yards per game to wide receivers. 30th in touchdowns per game allowed to opposing wide receivers. They're also 30th in yards per target allowed to outside wide receivers. 29th in touchdown rate allowed to outside wide receivers. So I do want to get back to Mike Evans in this particular matchup. I think you can still play Godwin. I don't think Godwin's a bad play. Like I said, the target tree's thin. We did see a weird thing on Monday night, and I don't know if it's just a one-off, but it does at least throw like another thing for us to think about, is that we did see David Moore run more pass routes than Trey Palmer for the first time all season.
Oh boy.
18-13. It was the lowest route rate that Trey Palmer's had in a game since week 2. I don't know what
is he battling that hip thing still, you think, from week 18 or no?
Yeah, maybe it's the injury he picked up at the end of the year. I don't really know, but he did have a season high 7 targets when these teams played earlier in the season. Trey Palmer, that is,
Yeah.
and he also had a 60-yard potential walk-in touchdown that Baker overthrew him in, and that's where it kind of leads us back. It circles back to the Baker Mayfield thing. So Baker Mayfield in this first matchup, it was his worst game of the year.
Hmm.
He had a 21.6% inaccurate throw rate, his second highest of the season. He was absolutely awful in this game, even when the Detroit didn't pressure him. Even without pressure, he only completed 56% of his passes. It was his lowest completion rate in a game without pressure this season. He had a 33% inaccurate target rate when he was pressured in that game, his highest rate in a game this season. Like I said, he had an Evans walk-in touchdown that was tipped and intercepted. He had a Trey Palmer walk-in touchdown he airmailed. But since that matchup, I know it was a bad matchup. If we want a box score hunt, we say like, all right, he sucked. But remember, he also sucked against the Eagles the first
True.
time he faced the Eagles and bounced back. He looked awesome. He looked good. He had a couple limpy moments where he still was doing the Baker Mayfield thing. Is he
The
still
Julio
100%?
Jones thing. Yeah.
He was throwing beams though on Monday night. He was
Yeah.
throwing laser beams. He had one of his better games. And if the Buccaneers catch a few more of those passes, he has an absolute even more monster game. And he already was the first Buccaneers quarterback to have 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns in the postseason game. But since these teams have played, we've been just beating up the Lions through the air. They're 31st in the NFL in passing yards per game since these teams have played in week 6. 8.9 yards per pass attempt, most in the league. 5.6% touchdown rate allowed to opposing quarterbacks, 29th in the league. 21.9 fantasy points per game allowed to opposing quarterbacks. The past month, they've allowed over 300 passing yards and multiple passing touchdowns to every quarterback. Nick Mullins threw for 411 and 396 yards against them. Dak Prescott, 345 yards. Stafford threw for 367 yards on Sunday night. And it all circles back to this team should let the teams run on them.
Yeah.
Like we joke about it flippantly, but like their run defense is so awesome. The Lions, like, I mean, we had to fade Kyren Williams. No running backs rushed for more than 69 yards in a game this season against the Lions.
Yeah.
And they nuked Kyren Williams again on Sunday night. They're going to nuke definitely Rachaad White. And this is one of the worst rushing teams in the NFL. I mean, the Buccaneers are dead last in the NFL in rate of runs that go for 5 or more yards. They're facing a premier run defense. When these teams played in week 6, Rachaad White had 26 passing yards. Like, they're just going to funnel stuff. And the Buccaneers are road dogs.
Everyone
Like,
wants to play Rachaad White, Reeves. I don't know. I don't understand.
Oh, he's like 30. Chalk.
He's like 35% right now. The stuff I'm looking at. That seems crazy to me.
Yeah, you're going to need at least 2 touchdowns, I think, from him this week because I don't think there's going to be any rushing offense. I just laid out the numbers.
Yeah.
No running back. So there's been 3 running backs this season that have had 100 total yards against the Lions. And all those guys had big receiving games. I guess that exists as a path for Rachaad White to get there. But overall, the Lions have allowed the fewest receiving points per game to running back. So like it's like that's not even
that's kind of why I like this game, Reeves. Game number 3. Also, like I think there's going to have to be passing on both sides, so there's going to be more plays overall. So like this game shapes up like really nice, I think, and I like that it's like the 3rd game of the week as well. And I did take the Trey Palmer over 19.5 yards. Like I have it on screen right now. Like he's got a bunch of big games in here. Like yeah, it could be one catch, but also like the volume's been there too. Like outside of last week, 6 targets, 5 targets, 6 targets. Like it's not like this guy is not getting any work whatsoever. So 19.5 yards seems like a massive overreaction to me. I still feel pretty good about that one. Again, pretty similar to the Robinson play last week that we took against this team. So anything else on this game before you want to move on here, Reeves?
No, I would say just be hesitant on chasing the Cade Otton game too. You know, obviously Cade Otton, not only those were all career highs for him. 11 targets, 8 catches, 89 career highs.
Yeah.
Like not just like a season high. This is the best game he had. Obviously he's only played 2 years.
Yeah.
But and if he didn't have a couple drops, I mean he would have had a monster. I know he was pass interfered, but he still dropped that one. He should have had a touchdown. Yeah. But before Monday night, he had just one other game this season where he had more than 49 yards in a game, and it was just a second game with more than 6 targets. I think he's a little bit it's a 4-game slate, so obviously he's going to be owned. You know, definitely mix him in. If you're playing Baker Mayfield, mix him into some of your stacks, but I wouldn't go crazy chasing the game he had.
Okay. Let's move on to the headliner. It's Chiefs-Bills. We get another playoff matchup. Hopefully it's as good as some of these other games have been, but a little different wrinkle here. We're at the Bills for this one. 2.5-point home favorites for Buffalo in this matchup. There's a lot of things at stake here, but I do have a slight bone to pick with my boy Josh Allen. You guys know I love Josh Allen, right? Reeves, we took the over on 8.5 rush attempts. So that basically nuked a 50 into 500 card. It nuked a 50 into 1250 card. It nuked 100 into 1,000 card. So I'm very upset that we didn't at least get a kneel down at the end of that game. But Reeves, you completely broke my heart when we were talking about this yesterday. Apparently, this line existed at 7.5 early in the week, and I missed it, right? So that's on me that I took the 8.5 and not the 7.5. But man, such a brutal run out, man. Like when you hit everything on your leg and you're missing the one rush attempt, just that hook.
It was the show last week when I came on. I told you I had bet it at
I loved
7.5.
Yeah.
I bet it opened at 7.5.
And I was like, oh, 8.5, that still looks fine. Still hammered it. Just idiot.
Yeah, you needed the Bills to get the ball back for a kneel down. You needed a kneel down.
Okay, well, let's talk about this game, and let's start with the Bills side of the ball.
That's brutal, though.
It is brutal. Just to help him, I guess help us, help him get us all the money back. It did take an over 45.5 rushing yards. Interesting for Josh Allen in general is he's just like absolutely gone crazy on the ground in the playoffs. They just completely unleash him. Some of his biggest rushing games of his entire career have been against Kansas City in the playoffs. So I do really like Allen again on the ground.
Yeah, what's interesting about this game is I think it's probably the most exciting game from like a real football stance again. Obviously, this rivalry has been one of the better recent rivalries we've had in sports. These teams have not really let us down. Like they play tight games. I mean, the past 3 games, 3 points, 4 points, 6 points. Like, these games have all been really tight games. I think from a fantasy stance, though, this is probably my least favorite game.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to when these teams played in week 14 and we did the matchup show, right? Like it's the same thing. Like that game opened at 49 and we like that game's going to go under. This game at least opened at 45. I think it was 46.5 and it's going to bet down to 45.5. Mm-hmm. I think this game goes under too. I think it goes under again.
This feels like the trap hammer game, honestly. That's why I like game number 3 so much, I think.
Yeah, I also do like the Bucks game more. The Mo is my favorite. If you were to ask me to rank these games from a fantasy perspective, Bucks Lions for sure would be one. We have seen some competency from the Chiefs the last 2 times we've seen them in full, and they could run into a similar layout that we saw last week, right? Like we talked about it, like they were going to face this Miami team that is just suffering so many injuries in the middle of the field that it was going to be kind of hard for them to stop even this version of the Chiefs, even though the Chiefs don't like go and score 40 against anybody anymore. Not this version, but like we've already seen the Bills. They've already lost Matt Milano for the season. Obviously, Tre'Davious White's out for the year. Terrell Bernard was carted off last week. Taron Johnson's in concussion protocol. And remember, the Bills have one less day this week than because that game got moved to Monday from Sunday to Monday. So they have one less day to get him out of concussion protocol or to get any of these injured guys healthy. It looks like Rasul Douglas is going to play. We'll see if Tyrell Dodson plays. Taylor Rapp left last week's game. Like they're just down a lot of bodies in the middle of the field. And if you look at Mahomes, what he did in the middle of the field last week against the Miami Dolphins with all those missing pieces, I mean, he was 17 of 23 passing in the middle of the field. And between the numbers when these teams played in week 14, he was only just 9 of 15 passing in that game against the Bills. He actually threw 22 times from the numbers to the sideline against the Bills. It was the most pass attempts he's had from the numbers to the sideline in a game this season. So the health of what the Bills have in the middle of the field is going to be really big in this game. And we're recording this on a Thursday morning. You're going to have to follow that into Sunday and actually see who's on the field. But it does set up for a similar layout where maybe the Bills are just too injured to kind of really do like in a similar spot where the Dolphins were.
Yeah.
I will say the Bills have throughout the course of the season through duct tape and bubble gum, like they've put this together defensively. Like they have held strong. And a big reason is because the defensive line has largely been healthy for the majority of the season. They've been able to just get pressure on quarterbacks like consistently. And the defensive line is still relatively healthy here. They're 8th in the NFL in pressure rate. When the Bills have pressured the opposing quarterback, they have a lot of 48.4% completion rate, 5.7 yards per pass attempt, and a 63 rating. They pressured Mahomes on 38% of his dropbacks in week 14. And when they pressured Mahomes, he was 7 of 16, 43.8%, 75 yards, 4.7 yards per pass attempt. Mahomes threw an interception under pressure. From a clean pocket in that game, though, Mahomes, 18 of 28, 7.3 yards per pass attempt, 196 yards, and a touchdown. So pass rush going to be vital again here, especially if they're missing any of those key pieces in the middle of the field, because we saw like David Long trying to fill in at linebacker, like completely lost in coverage multiple times. He didn't get enough depth in one of his drops. Rashee Rice has like a 35-yard gain. Like that's just vital for this game. You know, the health of these guys. The Bills have gotten away with it at this point of the season, but are they gonna be able to get away with it again against like, you know, playoff Mahomes?
Ownership
Uh,
reads though, like at least for the Chiefs guys, it looks pretty heavily in favor of like their trio essentially. So
yeah.
obviously Kelsey and Raji Rice were just the guys last week. I kind of think that Pacheco though at 6,400 might be one of my favorites in this entire game. I think that people are overreacting to the Trey Palmer thing. This is the one that I think people are really overreacting to, is that like Pacheco wasn't used in the passing game. So I took an over on the receiving yards for Pacheco. This Bills team really struggles to defend running backs in the passing game, like across the board. So I like that one quite a bit. The exact number that I took on that one was 19 and a half receiving yards for Pacheco. That feels like an absolute lock. He averaged 5 targets per game over the previous 4 games. I think people are freaking out there. So
Yeah, I mean, you look at he's played 4 full games now without Jerick McKinnon. He's got 20, 21, 25, and 25 touches in those games. You're just going to take that
yeah,
kind of volume, right? Like you just are. And then, like you said, this team has a very thin usage tree in general. Like it's literally down to Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce, and Isaiah Pacheco. Like,
yep,
and then just guys. I mean, they tried to get McCole Hardman involved last week, and this dude, it's same thing for his career, right? Like he's just never proven to be an actual functional like downfield wide receiver or
yeah,
any have had any type of nuance of playing the wide receiver position in general. The
mm-hmm.
only time McCole Hardman's been a successful NFL player is on all the jet motion stuff that they've run like in the red zone. He was
Yeah,
completely lost on 2 deep balls that should have been completed last week. But over the past 7 games, Rashee Rice has 60 targets. Travis Kelce, 50 targets. The next closest guy in the team is 19, Justin Watson.
mm-hmm.
Like it's just these 2 guys getting targeted in the passing game, and you've got Pacheco getting his high run out of touches.
Yeah.
So I mean,
But like
it
Pacheco
is.
versus like I don't know, like Rashad White, they're basically the same price. Like
Yes,
I strongly I'm in
I
favor of
agree.
Pacheco. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
agree. It is a tough rushing matchup again. I mean, the
yeah.
Bills have not allowed a running back to go over 80 yards rushing since week 6. You're hoping for the receiving stuff,
Mhm.
obviously, to kind of carry weight there. He does have touchdown equity, which we haven't seen like really from him last year. This year, he does have touchdown equity. The Chiefs actually have their lowest drop back rate in the red zone inside the 10, inside the 5 since 2019. Like they've
Mm.
gotten away from kind of doing all the goofy stuff because the offense hasn't been as good,
Mhm.
right? Like to get away with that shit. Like they
Yeah.
used to always do like that. Their offense just hasn't been good enough for them to just kind of be like, all right, we're gonna do ring around the rosy, right? And do
Right.
all these things. So we have seen Pacheco get that touchdown equity. It is just all about the passing game now. Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce. On
Mm.
a 4-gamer, Travis Kelce does stand out a little bit. He's been good in this matchup. We'll see again if the bodies that the Bills are missing. If they don't have Dodson, if they don't have Bernard, it could be a really good spot for Travis Kelce coming into this game. He had a chance for a big game last week. He had his highest, target rate in a game since week 7. Put a couple balls down on the ground,
Yep.
but he did have the 10 targets. He looked more like Travis Kelce, not of old, but of earlier in this season than he
Mhm.
did like because he kind of limped into the playoffs. Like going in, we were kind of like, this guy don't look right, and he
Right.
at least kind of looked okay-ish outside of the drops on Saturday night there.
Yeah.
And then Rashee Rice just been excellent. The past 7 weeks, he's been absolutely awesome. He actually, had a touchdown against the Bills when these teams played earlier in the year. Obviously, they don't have Taron Johnson too. Like that would be massive because he caught his touchdown from the slot. The Bills have been susceptible slot receivers. So the Chiefs side's easy to play if you want to play it.
Mhm.
Obviously, those guys all do come with like some salary restrictions. Obviously, Kelsey always does.
Yeah. Bill's side, I think it's a little bit of a different scenario, right? So I think a lot of people, if they're not playing Ravens defense, they're probably waiting to play the Bills at 2,800. I think they'll be heavily owned, but definitely interesting to see some injuries there. Khalil Shakur is like that kind of like cheaper wide receiver people are probably going to gravitate towards at 3,800. And then outside of that, it drops off pretty dramatically. No one wants to play Kincaid because they're scared they're going to get their touchdown taken away from Dawson Knox. And no one wants to play Diggs or Josh Allen in this spot. It seems like both those guys trending towards being sub 10%, even on a 4-game slate. So basically unowned. Does anything stand out on the Buffalo side of this one?
Well, I mean, listen, you can always play Josh Allen.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
last week, my play was say you just play Josh Allen. You don't play any other Bills.
Mhm.
You just don't play any other Bills because Josh Allen's good enough to get there on his own. And that's what I think is the case again. I will say this is from a ceiling perspective, though. There are maybe some pullback where like he doesn't have the 30-point game. I mean, this Chiefs defense this is the best defense they've had in the Mahomes era by far. And you go back to when these teams even played in week 14, the Bills scored on a touchdown on 2 of their opening 3 drives, and they did absolutely nothing the rest of that game. Opening two drives, Josh Allen was 7 of 11, 86 yards, the passing touchdown and a rushing touchdown. Bills went up 14-0. Then the rest of the game, Josh Allen, 16 of 30 passing, 4.9 yards per pass attempt. He had an interception. The Chiefs pressured Josh Allen on 47.9% of his dropbacks in that game. Josh Allen had just one game this season where he was pressured at a higher rate, and it was the Dallas game, and he only dropped back to pass 19 times in that game because they didn't have to. They just ran the whole game. But when pressured in that game, Josh Allen actually was okay-ish, 6.6 yards per pass attempt, 125 yards. It's when the Chiefs didn't pressure him. He was 12 of 23 for 108 yards, 4.7 yards for pass attempt when the Chiefs didn't get pressure on him. Also, the Chiefs, third in the NFL, 6.2 yards per pass attempt allowed from a clean pocket this season. Like, this is a good defense.
Yeah.
It's not just they haven't been predicated on getting pressure or Chris Jones wrecking something. Like, this has been a great defense. In the wild card round, Tua threw for 5.7 yards per pass attempt without pressure. Only completed 58.6% of his passes when he wasn't pressured.
Yeah.
This is a legitimately, like I said, the best defense that they've had this season. They're also an awesome second half defense. And we saw that the first time these teams have played. In the second half of games this season, the Chiefs, league low, 55.2 completion percent allowed. Third in the NFL in yards per pass attempt allowed. Third in passing touchdowns allowed. Just 7 passing touchdowns allowed in the second half of games this season. So there is an opportunity, I think, where even if Josh Allen hits and has a good Josh Allen game, it's kind of like what we talked about, like maybe with McCaffrey. Like, he probably doesn't shadow realm us. He could still, like, maybe this game pops, but I think this game is more in line with the Bills Chiefs games we had the past 2 years, where they're like mid-20s to low 20s games, like 24-21, 23-20, something like that. And like, at his salary, if he's only going to have 20 to 25 points, that's a lot more palatable to come off of him from an ownership perspective.
Totally. I'm with you on that. Let's go ahead and
play him naked, though. Diggs is the guy. We touch on Diggs just real quick.
Sure.
I actually already bet a Diggs under, and I hate to do it, but you look at this now. I mean, he's just in another like terrible spot. It's not just him not reaching the end zone or reaching 100 yards. We've talked about this ad nauseum. I think we talked about it last week with Tyreek Hill too. Kansas City has absolutely erased wide receiver ones this year. The most receiving yards a wide receiver one has had against the Chiefs in a game this season is 73. Diggs is sitting at 64.5, his prop in a lot of places.
66.5 on PrizePicks Reeves. I might take this right now. I like that.
They've only allowed 3 wide receivers that have wide receiver ones that have more than 65 receiving yards in a game this season. And they said 73 is the high. Here's the thing. They faced beasts.
Yeah.
They faced Tyreek Hill twice. He had 62 yards in each game receiving. Devontae Adams has the 73, the highest. He had 4 yards in his other game. A.J. Brown, 8 yards. Justin Jefferson, 28 before he left that game. He left in the fourth quarter. Amon-Ra, 71. One of the guys that actually had more than the 65, but 71 for Amon-Ra. Again, you look at Amon-Ra's box scores, like they did a great job. 55 yards to Keenan Allen. Jamar Chase, 41 yards. Guess what? They also fade Diggs. Diggs had 11 targets and only had 24 yards in this matchup. His 2 lowest yards per outrun games since joining the Bills have come against the Chiefs. He's only cleared 77 yards one time against the Chiefs. He's only at 70 yards in 2 of his 6 games since Spags and these teams have all linked up in this good rivalry. So, I mean, it hurts me to take a Diggs under, but I think it's justified on all the objective data. And then also, too, when you just look at Diggs, it's not like he's been on a heater, right? Like, why is his prop even 65?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could make an argument the usage was a little bit better over the last couple of weeks, and we saw a little bit more of what we used to see. But I'm with you, man. This is a scary one.
His past 12 games, 51.3 receiving yards per game.
Yeah, well, that I guess explains why no one wants to play him in DFS as well. So let's go ahead and jump into.
Taking a good player under is always tough when it's this, because it's not because it's not like when we're like giving a Tyreek Hill under, right? Because it's 100 yards.
This is like a realistically like a mid-range number and for a really good player. Like those are
exactly. That's what makes it tough. It's tougher. I think objectively everything lines up to take it, but usually when we're taking unders on good players, it's hey, A.J. Brown's at 99.5 yards.
Right.
We're going to take an under on that, right? Like something like that, where this is, like you said, it's a mid-range number, or like one deep ball, right? Like one missed jam at the line of scrimmage. Just one play could wreck this, but I definitely think it's validated though.
Okay, safe to say Stephon Diggs is not going to be on our team, but let's go ahead and build a lineup here. Reeves, what do you want to let's say this is like a more of a larger field team. Like might as well, right? We only have so many of these slates left. Let's shoot for the stars on a little bit of a I guess less stacking, get some of the guys we like. Where do you want to go directionally with this one?
Yeah, well, one guy we didn't talk about in that game that I think is a good play too, as well as James Cook.
Okay.
James Cook, I think I think James Cook is the key to that game. If
Okay.
the Bills, I think if the Bills are going to win that game, he was a huge part of the game plan early in that game against the Chiefs. Obviously, he wrecked them in the opening quarter. He had 6 of 8 backfield touches, 79 yards and a touchdown, and they just got away from him. The rest of the game, he only had 9 of 18 backfield touches in that game. They were using guys like Ty Johnson, Latavius Murray. They've got to ride James Cook in this game because
Okay.
I think he's the key. You want to beat the Chiefs through backfield play, running backs out of the backfield. They will give up splash plays in the running game. I
Hmm.
think he's interesting. Let's see. I don't know if we can fit him in. Do
Well,
we do
we could try. I still
yeah,
think
do you just want to do a non-McCaffrey team in
that's what I was just
general?
going to say. I think we do a non-McCaffrey team. We hope he gets his 19, like we said, and then we have a bunch of room to spend up in some other spots. But I guess
All right, so we have to play running back. So I guess
we
that
have
would
to
be
play running backs. Yeah. What do you think about like Saturday in general? Like, do you want to burn? I guess what would you want? What would you want to burn a slot on for Saturday? Because I think we both agree we like this Tampa and Detroit game quite a bit, but we're going to need some differentiation and some early info. I think from Saturday.
Oh yeah, I mean you have to have a 49er.
Yeah.
Like you just have to.
Yeah.
Like this seems that good. If we're not playing McCaffrey,
Debo's the lowest owned as of now, like 4%, because he's 7,700. He's really expensive. So I think that he's going to be the one that people don't click.
but I also, if we're not going to play McCaffrey, I kind of would like to just do like an Amon-Ra plus Evans.
Ooh, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm in for that. I think like the alphas in that game makes a ton of sense.
So
So
do we do Kittle then?
we could do Kittle. Yeah,
Because I don't think we won't have the salary to play Ayuk or Debo.
that's true. Okay, so let's get Kittle in there, and then I'll just for as a placeholder put the Bills D in at 2,800. So we have a later defense there. So yeah, I mean this.
Chiefs at 2,700, I think is actually playable too because listen, Josh might give you a couple.
That's true. Okay, I like the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs defense is going to be significantly lower than the Bills. So let's go with
Yeah, because
that.
Mahomes doesn't really throw interceptions. Josh can have 30
Josh will chuck
fantasy
it.
points and still
Yeah.
throw. We're also
Okay.
on a first name basis.
I like that. You and Josh. Yeah. I mean, Josh and I are on the outs right now currently after he fucked me last week. But okay. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, flex. So we still, I guess, if we wanted to get like
Did you put Cook in then?
Cook is in currently.
I
Yeah.
don't think it matters that we have Chiefs either.
No, not on a 4-game slate. Like Baker, 6K, very cheap. Goff, 6,300.
Oh yeah, I want to do Baker for
Baker.
sure.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah,
So we got Baker in there. 4,800 running back, wide receiver, and a flex. So like on like the cheaper side of things, we're probably going to have to pick at least one of these Detroit wide receivers still, like the cheaper ones, if we're going this direction. So Josh Reynolds versus Jameson Williams.
Can't we do Palmer? We have Baker. Can we do Palmer or more?
Palmer, 3,500. Who do you like between those guys? I don't want to talk you into Palmer.
I still like Palmer the most. It's just like
scary.
We're just flying blind on like was his like playing time reduced because of injury? He
Fair.
still had the long touchdown and he had an end zone target before that too. So I still think like I want to play guys against the Lions, man. And I think that from a game script perspective, the Bucks are gonna have to throw anyways, no matter what game script they're in. They're gonna have to like you aren't running on the Lions. Whereas if the Lions do get ahead, we know they are gonna try to run.
True. Okay. I'm in on that. What do you think about so what do you think about this last running back slot, essentially? Because that changes what we're going to be doing with this last wide receiver slot, most likely. Yeah. So we're looking at some really bad matchups. If we want to get in like anyone else from the Tampa Bay and Detroit game, we could get in Singletary. That could be like some early information. He'll be pretty chalky, but I think that's still decent information to have at 5,700. Or we could jam in Pacheco, and then we're pigeonholed into a cheaper wide receiver at that point, which isn't the worst thing.
I mean, we do have a heavy wide receiver build. I mean, do we just do a punt and take a shot on like a Justice Hill and just try to get like, because here's the thing why I say Justice Hill is viable on the 4-game slate is because you only need Christian McCaffrey to have like 20, right?
Right.
And then if the rest of the running backs are in the teens,
true,
a 10-point Justice Hill game is actually like viable.
Yeah, and his ceiling isn't that meaningfully different than Gus Edwards on this slate, which is interesting. But we save a ton of salary, and then our flex at that point we got 6,100, so we can get into like a Zay Flowers, a Kelsey, a Singletary, like a Dobbs. Like there's a million things we can do here. I would prefer to leave some salary on the table for sure, though.
Yeah, so I like Justice Hill in the context of the 4-game slate because of what I said.
Early
right?
info.
Like,
Yep.
And like I don't think the way the running back slate sets up outside of McCaffrey to where like we're gonna see a lot of these running backs have these huge games. I think James Cook is capable. I think Pacheco is capable. Obviously, the Lions guys kind of eat each other. I don't think Aaron Jones runs back to what he did last week. We've already talked about. I think Rashad White is bad chalk.
Yep.
On the slate. So I do think that just because the other thing too is, we don't know what Dalvin Cook, if he's even going to play or not, right? With the Ravens, we know they did activate him, but Justice Hill is the passing down back for the Ravens.
Yeah.
And what that means is he's not going to he's not going to lose those snaps. That's the whole problem when like people try to make Keaton Mitchell a thing, is that Justice Hill was never conceding those snaps.
True.
So he's still going to have that role. And then he just gives us a better access to a pass catcher, whereas like we could play like Devin Singletary, right?
Good.
But, like Devin Singletary's like floor is still probably equal to where like Justice Hill's is, right?
Yeah.
So
I think we grab a Green Bay guy here or something, like a Green Bay wide receiver that's going to be a little bit lower. We got Dobbs, we got Reeves, we got
Kelsey,
Wicks.
right? Like,
We could play Kelsey as well. Yeah.
I mean, double hammer tight end.
Double hammer tight end. All right, let's go.